Tim, working with Enter Shikari on tour in the USA right now. Just going to do a quick walkthrough of our MIDI and computer setup for the Take to the Skies 10-year anniversary show. For this show we run two laptops, both running Ableton, running simultaneously so that we have a redundant audio system. They both run to individual sound cards, and we use a radial switch, just an auto switching device, so if one goes down, the next can take over and the show will run seamlessly. So we run all of our MIDI from an iConnectMIDI4+, which is on stage and situated on the drum riser. We run an Ethernet cable out to that, and then I use a switch back at Laptop World to split that into both machines so that we can achieve synchronized timeline selection and playback and so on and so forth. On stage we have MIDI coming from various spots, first of which we've got to is Chris's keyboard on here. So we have, as Ableton plays through the timeline, various points in the set and different songs, different sounds in software synthesizer will turn on and off depending on what point in the song we're at, so that it's totally automated, so the parts that the guys want to play live appear on the relevant keyboard at the correct time in the set, and then Ableton will then cycle on to the next setting, the next synth sound that they require, and place that to be receiving information from the correct point at the correct part of the set. So one wired keyboard over here, which is running MIDI line directly into the interface. Then we have a wireless MIDI keyboard set up for Rao, our singer. In order to do that, we use a portable phone battery and a product called a MIDI beam, which allows us to achieve wireless MIDI signal, which runs to a receiver back here, and then runs a MIDI line again into the interface. Now for all our guitars on stage, so Rory's the main guitarist, we run two separate Kempers. We have a Kemper for Rory and a Kemper for Rao. Again, Ableton is transmitting via the MIDI4+ to do patch changes and parameter changes on effects pedals like pitch shifting effects and things like that. So we're able to make the show a lot more true to the way the records sound, and also it allows them to be more free without having to use complicated pedal boards to achieve certain effects, and it just makes everything run a little smoother. Another part of Chris's world, which is some of his bass pedal board down here, we have Ableton automating his Digitech whammy pedal as well, which is similar to the way that we work with the Kemper profiling amps. But as Chris still loves his pedals, so we still use a bunch of pedals for him. And as you can see, so we are able to turn the pedal on and off and doing parameter changes and so on. It's just kind of a cool effect. You can create effects out of these pedals which you wouldn't humanly be possible to do, like really quick on and offs and sort of dive bombs which stutter and things like that, which is something that's quite unique to this band's sound, and really helps bring the show alive.
What?
So we use a MIDI controller by a company called called an AlphasSphere, and it's effectively a MIDI controller which has sort of constant moving macro control on each of these pads. So it's a note on, and then what we're doing with it is controlling the cutoff frequency of a filter. So you can get a sort of dubsteppy wob kind of sound, like so. The more pressure you put on the pad, the more it opens up the filter, and it just means you can get away with those kind of cool dubsteppy effects and play it live. Because the only other way would be to do a modulation wheel. It's a bit clumpy and awkward, so this is a really great product for achieving that kind of those kind of performance tools. So around here in drum world, which is kind of the hub of all MIDI activity on the Enter Shikari stage, we have the iConnectMIDI4 Plus sat just down here next to Rob. The way we connect this up is we have our Ethernet cable running from both computers, like I explained, and these are the various lines. So this is running out to from Chris's keyboard and to his bass. This is Raoul's wireless receiver and the guitars, and then we have a loop which runs via the Roland SP-DSX, via the Vibration MIDI controller, which allows Rob to queue up tracks using the buttons on the MIDI controller, which are programmed to line up with transport locators in Ableton. And then we have play and stop on the shoulder pads of the SP-DSX. And having Rob do that and having it run down MIDI instead of being with me in laptop world is what allows us to sync both machines, because as it runs down the Ethernet line and then into the gigabit switch and then hits both laptops, it means that as soon as he hits a button, it happens on both machines. Hits play, goes on both machines, and they run perfectly in sync. Which means that if for whatever reason one laptop falls over or a sound card or so on and so forth, it's, we have a redundancy for all of that, so it means the show will continue. But so certain points in the set, there's sort of dancier sections, and so throughout, in the same way that Ableton would be controlling automation for guitars and bass, it will turn on and off drum samples at certain points in the set. So they're never replacement samples for the live drums, but they're more, if there's a deliberate electronic section, we want like an electronic kick and snare coming out, then that's what we use that for. So currently we have Ableton controlling patches on the SP-DSX in order to, effectively it will swap the patch at the correct point in the song, and it will move to a patch where there are triggers present, where triggers should be. And then we spit those out of separate outputs from the SP-DSX. So what we used to do was have one machine which had a drum rack in Ableton that was doing the same thing, but because we tried combining that all, and the latency was just ridiculous. Because we have every song is in one Ableton session, and it just, throughout the set, the locators jump from point to point. So we came up with doing it this way because you're able to actually house the audio of the samples in the SP-DSX, and that allows it removes some of the CPU load from the computers, which means I can run both sessions, both synchronized sessions simultaneously. Like, they are constantly wanting to push boundaries in what we're doing on stage, and so to be able to have something that can support anything that they can throw at it. Sure, that I would say that probably is, but it means that they're not, when they're coming up with ideas of what they want to do next, it wouldn't be in their mind that it technically would be an issue to achieve. What was really attractive to us is being able to plug two machines into one box, and it talks to both of them. That being said, having used it, we just found it to be fairly thoughtless. Hasn't fallen over on us at all. It's been great. So moving into now how we have our various redundancy setups, we continue using it because it has the network port, which some MIDI solutions don't have, and which allows us to it allows us to run it exactly how we want to, basically. It's all the flexibility of the internal routing of it as well, which is really, really thorough. You can basically send anything to anywhere, and it can route internally, which is a really interesting fun feature to play around with. Before, we also didn't necessarily have a way of an easy solution of getting class compliant MIDI into our MIDI setup. The way we were running with our old interfaces and stuff like that wasn't such an easy task to do. And a lot of devices these days, as people will know, only have USB MIDI instead of having traditional 5-pin. So for the unit to be able to handle that as well is really important for us, because the band wants to be able to add devices and not be limited to what we can use on stage. So my job is to always be able to say yes to what they want to be able to do on stage, and so a unit like this is perfect because it allows has all those different functionalities, and then it allows us to run everything exactly how we want. It just ticked all the boxes for what we need, with the amount of MIDI that runs on stage, and I'm sure that we'll continue to stretch it and add devices, which is a constant requirement. It's been a great unit for us.